So I've recently done the last class I gave of HEMA class, a small club. I sort of give classes to. As you know, I'm a club instructor. I give classes to newbies, HEMA newbies, because there is really nothing of that sort where I live. I live in a shithole in northeastern Mexico, and that means that I have to be the only HEMA class there. There's of course an Arma group where I live, but I mean it's Arma, what do you expect? They don't use synthetics, they don't like Purple Heart Army, and they do not allow anyone to attend any other sort of historical combat group, which I don't like. I like to have variety. And speaking of variety, I have recently experimented learning and trying to spar with light padded weapons. Specifically, these things I made. These are really light, really short. They're basically a PVC pipe with a bit of waterproof insulation. So you put this on the PVC, you glue it together or just keep it in there somehow, and you get yourself a nice little padded sword. And you can do this with a variety of PVC. This is the lightest one they had. And originally I planned to use this for my kids' class. But I found out that these here make some really good practice weapons for a few reasons. First of all, you can train with very little to no equipment with these. You don't need much. Perhaps the only thing are gloves, but if you only use blows, you don't need any sort of protective equipment for the face. Only very light gloves, and that's it. And that means that with these, you develop, well, first of all, fear for those overhead cuts. A lot of times I've seen people just cutting wildly and getting bonked in the head really hard because they don't defend their guards. Secondly, because these are so light, this means that you can develop your timing and distance in your reactions. As you know, I studied British military saber, along with some other weapons like small sword and earlier weapons like side sword. So these 800 gram swords were this 600 gram sword with a point of balance that's quite far away from the hilt. So is the case with this one. They are quite slow. And this is a good thing to develop the strength needed to wield a historically accurate weapon that could indeed deliver an effective cut. However, something I found is that your reaction time is indeed affected, which means that these here allow us to train our reaction time really, really well. They allow us to do a bunch of drills very safely. So for newbies, it's nice to have the beefy, heavy option in order to develop technique and strength. But one thing that you do have to keep in mind when sparring with these is that they require a lot of strength and they require a lot of control. So for newbies who still don't know how to pull their blows or how to stop a blade before it hits the opponent, these are actually great options. I really am starting to grow a liking to this sort of thing. And this means that I can also understand using very light sabers for purely training purposes. I still think that for competition and for sparring, you should primarily use this with a lot of protective equipment because this is what most accurately simulates combat, and that's what we're going for. This is HEMA after all. And at least the HEMA I like to understand the historical context and simulate combat as much as possible. I got into HEMA because I like history and I like fighting. which means that I do like the more martial stuff on HEMA, and of course the historical research or of, oh, what clothing did they use? What time were they saved? How was the temperature back then? Why did they use such and such? All this sort of stuff I really like. If you don't like that, that's fine. But I do like it. Which means that this is very interesting because back in the day, people, at least Charles Roth, as well as Captain G. Sinclair, both of them advised training, or rather should I say sparring, with single sticks and drilling with sharp swords. What I mean with drilling is, you know, the 6-cut drill, you should practice it with this. Most of your training should be drills, and you should practice with a properly weighted weapon. But when sparring, they didn't have the protective equipment we have, therefore they use single sticks. And I can see the advantages because if you have the strength to wield a full weight weapon like this, but then reaction time to see a blow coming with these sort of swords and the strength to react appropriately to a sword that is very light, with this, I can see how this could be very advantageous in a brawl or in a duel or a battlefield situation. I'm starting to appreciate lighter weapons as training tools. I still think we should spar with this, but I can understand now why something like a dueling saber might be very popular. You may be able to train for longer if you do it correctly, but that's a thing. You have to do it correctly. And competitions based purely on dueling saber are not really, well, viable combat arts. If you train for a competition using dueling sabers, there is no incentive for you to use a dueling saber. That way you would use a actual infantry officer saber. And as Russ Mitchell has said, the dueling saber didn't exist as a sharp form. It was purely a practice weapon. So yeah, that's this little video on the nature of lighter practice weapons and how I'm starting to appreciate them a bit more for HEMA training. I'd advise you to either buy one of these, already made foam sword, especially if it's for HEMA, or you can make one yourself. These are very easy to make, very safe also, especially if you've got good gloves. And yeah, that's my hot take for the moment. Let me know what you guys think about it.